Word that the black QR code for cross-boundary travelers may soon be scrapped. John Lee says the pain of the 2019 social unrest violence should not be forgotten. And Israeli forces now in phase 2 of their assault on Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Hello and welcome to TVB Pearl. The so-called black QR code, a health declaration required of cross-boundary travelers in the past few years, may be scrapped as soon as the 1st of November. The city's sole delegate to the country's top legislative body, the National People's Congress Standing Committee, revealed the cancellation is undergoing final approval on the mainland. Sharon Tang reports.
Cross-boundary travelers have been required to fill in an electronic health declaration for generation of a black QR code to facilitate their trip during and after the pandemic. There's word that travelers may no longer have to do that starting next month. Our reporters checked out the situation at the Liantang Hengyunwai control point today, and we had to show the black QR code. Still, a customs officer told us it's not clear when the cancellation of the measure will take effect. Over at the Express Rail Link's West Kowloon station, customs officers demanded travelers who display symptoms such as a fever to make a declaration. Some travelers told us when there is heavy traffic on the weekends, sometimes they are not required to make such declarations. So we reached out to Starry Lee, who has been calling for the cancellation of the black QR code.
I have contacted the custom in PRC. What I got is that it is still under the final approval status, but I'm quite confident that a new measure will take place on the 1st of November. What are the details? I just cannot tell on behalf of them. I welcome that, of course. I think this is another big step moving forward for recovery. I believe it will help facilitate people flow between different places.
Some travelers echoed the sentiment. Like this traveler from Dongguan who thinks it will save a lot of time if tourists are not required to scan the code. Others think otherwise. This tourist from Malaysia said some people just don't have ethics and it's a big deal if they bring in viruses to Hong Kong. Responding to media inquiries, the Shenzhen Customs said the health declaration is still strictly implemented at border crossings. None of the control points have removed devices that are used to scan the black QR code. Hong Kong Security Bureau, meanwhile, said it will closely monitor and cope with the official announcement from mainland authorities. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
High-speed rail services were temporarily suspended in Hong Kong because of a malfunction. It gradually resumed after about 20 minutes. A staff member at West Kowloon Station said the train was departing Hong Kong when the suspension was announced at 2:10 p.m. The cause of the malfunction is still being investigated. Speaking on TVB News, the CE has defended his administration's move to strengthen national education, saying one should never forget the pain felt during the 2019 social unrest. That's after a former senior government official expressed concern about the government overdoing it in handling national security issues, saying that could affect people's desire to have children. Sharon Tang has more.
In a rare move, the SCR administration has proposed a series of measures to stimulate the city's low birth rate, including a $20,000 cash bonus for each newborn. Chief Executive John Lee said whether or not to extend that cash reward will depend on the measure's effectiveness. Still, when it comes to the big decision of having children, not only money, but also the future of Hong Kong and education prospect do play an important role. A former government official recently expressed concerns that the government is overdoing it in dealing with national security issues, so much so that such policies would also affect matters that have nothing to do with national security. The former official also worried that would affect how the public and the rest of the world think of Hong Kong. Speaking to TVB News, the CE said, although the wounds of the 2019 violence had healed, one should never forget how painful it was at the time. He added implementing national education well will help all sectors in the community reach a consensus in how to move forward. Meanwhile, the policy address also outlined plans to relax the decade-old property market cooling measures that were put in place to curb speculative activities.
我哋係唔希望樓價大起大跌。
While Lee didn't comment on whether he thinks home prices are still high, he stressed the government's role is to ensure there's a reasonable supply of housing units and that there is enough transparency in information for potential homebuyers to make a decision. With national security legislation under Article 23 of the Basic Law set to be completed next year, the CE said foreign investors do pay attention to the city's stability, and that is exactly what the legislation can help. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
Overseas communications was restored to many people in Gaza early today after a two-day blackout, during which most residents were cut off from the outside world. Israeli warplanes carried out airstrikes near Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa, which was packed with patients and tens of thousands of Palestinians seeking shelter. Israel has said Gaza's Hamas rulers have a command post under the hospital, something Hamas denies. All this after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced a second stage in Israel's war on Hamas. Nazvi Karim has more.
Israeli Defense Force spokesman Daniel Hagari tells Gaza residents who are still in the north of the enclave to move south as airstrikes intensify. But Palestinians cut off from communication systems and the internet are unable to receive the message. This leads to more chaos and casualties among the 2.3 million people cramped inside the enclave. With the death toll edging close to 8,000 as of Saturday, the two-day blackout worsened the situation for people in Gaza and left only those with international SIM cards and satellite phones able to get news out. Those injured by bombs and collapsed buildings were unable to call ambulances. Ambulance drivers said they would follow the sound of explosions to check on possible casualties. Social media users appealed to Tesla, SpaceX and ex-chief Elon Musk, asking him to provide his Starlink internet services to Gaza, just like he did for Ukraine in their war with Russia. Musk said he would make it available for the UN and recognized aid organizations, a move Israel opposed. But on Sunday, online services returned to Gaza just as Israel launched its latest and so far longest incursion into Hamas territory. Stopping short of describing it as an all-out ground assault, Netanyahu said it's phase 2 of the campaign after 3 weeks of non-stop airstrikes.
Israel said it was recalling its diplomats from Turkey after President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Ankara was preparing to declare Israel a war criminal. Erdogan was addressing a massive crowd waving Turkish and Palestinian flags on Saturday. He said, Israel, we will proclaim you as a war criminal to the world, without providing the mechanism by which he would do so. He also blamed Western countries for enabling Israel to carry out bombings on the Gaza Strip. Earlier in the week, Erdogan said Hamas was not a terrorist group, but freedom fighters trying to liberate their lands. Turkey and Israel only recently restored full diplomatic ties. More pro-Palestinian protests took place all over the world. The numbers were larger than previous weekends. David Garrett reports.
Sydney on Sunday, and for the third weekend, demonstrations over the war in the Middle East here and around the planet. Both sides of the conflict were represented in Australia's largest city. Children carried dolls caked in fake blood to highlight the plight of Palestinian youngsters caught in the conflict. Thousands were on the streets, including Jews who want peace.
Jews like me reject what Zionists are doing in our name. We reject the genocide that is continuing in Palestine, and the savagery is quite unbelievable.
Earlier at Circular Quay, pro-Israel demonstrators marched in silence to condemn the use of hostages as human shields by Hamas. An art installation has been set up to represent those kidnapped. There are empty chairs and shoes for the over 200 held captive.
Thinking of all our brothers and sisters in Israel and show that the only thing we want is to bring our hostages home. We don't want any more deaths, we don't want any more casualties, we just want peace, we just want our hostages returned to us immediately.
Across the globe, most marches were for the protection of Palestinian civilians. In New York, thousands passed over the Brooklyn Bridge, which had to be closed. They marched to Manhattan and in the shadow of the UN headquarters called for a ceasefire. Britain's capital saw larger crowds, described as one of London's biggest recent marches. Throngs walked together past historical landmarks. Authorities estimated the number at around 60,000. 2 arrests were made. Police have been criticised by some for not clamping down on hate speeches by protesters, but others say they must speak up.
What Israel is doing is being normalised across the world, and we must not stand for it. We must stand for the oppressed, and we must all march on every occasion and every opportunity.
The scenes were replicated throughout Europe. Some French cities have banned protests, fearing an escalation of ethnic tensions. But in Marseille, they marched. The numbers here were smaller, in the hundreds, but they were loud and proud.
To stand in solidarity with people who are having their lives absolutely razed in an act of genocide felt like something important for me to do, rather than just sitting around at home, watching the news feeling useless about it.
Rome and Berlin saw large gatherings, but the biggest by far was in Istanbul. Hundreds of thousands gathered for a massive rally in support of Gaza. Despite a rebuke from Israel this week after calling Hamas freedom fighters, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan addressed the masses, calling Israel war criminals, and said the West bears responsibility too. David Garrett, TVB News.
In other news, a fire at a mine in Kazakhstan has killed at least 32 people, and some others are still unaccounted for. The site is run by ArcelorMittal Taramtau, a company the government plans to take over. It appears a methane blast caused the fire. 200 workers were evacuated, but some did not escape in time. 18 needed medical attention for carbon monoxide poisoning. President Kassym Jomart Tokayev made today a national day of mourning and went to speak to relatives in Karaganda. Kazakhstan is currently in the process of nationalizing plants and mines run by ArcelorMittal after a series of safety breaches and lack of investment. The company have confirmed they're working with the state on a sale. Still ahead, the financial secretary says the city's third quarter economic growth may be slower than originally expected. Anti-burglary efforts by police in the Peak area. And former U.S. Vice President Mike Pence ends his campaign for the White House. Welcome back. Hong Kong's third quarter economic growth is estimated to have been slower than originally expected. That's according to Financial Secretary Paul Chan. He also said the city's property prices should be left for the market to decide as long as price swings do not put financial stability at risk. Jason Tan reports.
Financial Secretary Paul Chan said in his blog post that while Hong Kong is expected to post economic growth in the third quarter, the rate is lower than originally expected. That's due to headwinds from the external environment, such as escalating geopolitical tensions. He stressed that the government will continue to promote the development of different industries to attract talents to come and work in Hong Kong and companies to invest in the city. Meanwhile, speaking on a radio program, Chan also gave his take on the newly revamped capital investment entrance scheme, which has raised the threshold from $10 million to $30 million. Under the new scheme, those who invest $30 million or above in assets such as stocks, funds, bonds, etc., excluding real estate, can apply for residency in Hong Kong.
我哋係希望盡可能吸一啲高端啲嘅，更加有錢嘅。
Chan said the government wants to attract more high net worth individuals to come to Hong Kong to launch their business, as this will benefit the city. While foreign investors are welcome to buy property here, the revamped investment residency scheme excludes property investments. Chan said this is because the government does not want the property market to be affected by an influx of foreign capital, which in turn will disadvantage local residents. Chan also commented on the government's move to relax some property market cooling measures, including halving the respective rates of the buyer's stamp duty and the new residential stamp duty to 7.5%. Citing statistics, Chan said Hong Kong's property prices had dropped by around 17% in the past 2 years. He said the price drop will make it easier for young people to buy a property and start a family of their own, or for those who want to move to a larger unit after having a newborn. The financial secretary added if the price swings do not put the banking system at risk or create a confidence crisis, it will be better to let the market mechanism to run its course. Jason Hunt, TVB News.
Theft and burglary cases have jumped since the city returned to normalcy following the pandemic. To address the issue, police on Hong Kong Island have stepped up anti-burglary efforts both from the land and sky. Jackie Lin reports on one of the operations.
Mobilizing more than 60 officers from various ranks and departments alongside police dogs in the central and western districts, this anti-burglary operation aims to comb through parts of the Peak, spanning an area from Mount Khaled to Mount Cameron.
Yes, sir!
The land mission aims to deter break-ins and uncover common hideouts of suspected burglars. And it's not just boots on the ground, but also eyes in the sky.
Police have been concerned about the situation of burglary in the Peak. Due to the geographical features, burglars could easily flee after committing an offense.
Common burgling tactics include climbing into residences by using nearby trees. Anti-burglary efforts include interception of suspicious vehicles and overnight patrols at black spots. During the January to September period, the Central District and the Peak recorded 26 cases of burglary, 7 more cases than last year. Alec Chan Wai-chun, chairman of the District Fight Crime Committee of the Central and Western District, said they conduct regular meetings with the police to enhance crime prevention.
Police said they will also further step up communication with local residents alongside joint efforts with other government departments using the latest technology to prevent and crack down on burglary cases. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
In Seoul, South Koreans remembered the dead 1 year on from a stampede that killed 160 mostly young people last Halloween. As a result, on Saturday, ahead of the 31st of October, celebrations were muted. Most chose not to wear flamboyant costumes. Instead, they posted notes of condolence, saying victims will not be forgotten. Most bars did not decorate for the festival. Many more police are deployed this year to provide extra crowd control. In January, a special police investigation team blamed their own officers for not providing sufficient measures last year, despite knowing huge numbers would descend on the popular Itaewon area for Halloween. The 3-day Beijing Xiang Forum, China's biggest annual platform for military diplomacy, started today in the capital. State news agency Xinhua reported that 22 defense ministers and 14 military chiefs from abroad are taking part in the forum. That's the highest in terms of the number of participants and their rank since the forum was first held in 2006. The U.S. Defense Department has sent a delegation led by Xanthi Karas, China Country Director in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense. But the forum is taking place this year without a Chinese defense minister who typically hosts the event. This after Li Shangfu was removed from the position last week, and no replacement has so far been named. State media reported that Zhang Yuxia and He Weidong ranked number 2 and 3 in the military, separately held bilateral meetings with defense ministers from Laos, Mongolia, and Vietnam on Saturday. In the U.S., one of the Republican presidential candidates has withdrawn from the race. Mike Pence, who was vice president under Donald Trump, dropped out. His association with the former president has always been a problem. He was a partner to Trump in the White House, but has been a fierce critic since Trump lost the presidency. Trump describes Pence as disloyal. Pence admitted it was an uphill battle to convince Republicans that he could be a better alternative than Trump.
But the Bible tells us that there's a time for every purpose under heaven. Traveling across the country over the past 6 months, I came here to say it's become clear to me this is not my time. So after much prayer and deliberation, I have decided to suspend my campaign for president effective today.
That's the news. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.